Okay, hi everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're gonna start in a minute or so. We're just giving like people the time to still join the session, and then yeah, we're gonna start a webinar about like Kubernetes and KubeCon and all the things that you need to know about Atlanta.
Let
So
us know where you are joining from in the chat. Is this being live streamed or is it Zoom only?
I think it's Zoom only.
Zoom only? Cool. Let us know in the chat where you are joining from.
Yep. By the way, also, as we wanted to make, oh, we see people from New York. So, as this webinar is supposed to be the most interactive as it can be, please don't hesitate to ask question in the chat, and we will keep time at the end of the webinar to go through them and like answer as much as we can. Oh, cool. We see a lot of people from the US. Do we have any people outside the US? Because, here we have two hosts outside of the US, like Kunal and me, that were like not based in USA. Ah, I see someone from the UK. Oh,
That
you, of
was
course,
that
Kunal.
was me.
Kunal.
Yeah, I was reading it and I was like, yeah, but it's you.
Oh, India's Sam's from India. That's
India. It's not
Isn't
a
it
little bit
like
late?
isn't it like midnight?
Yeah, it's
Definitely.
something like that, right? It's pretty late in India right
Yeah,
now.
it's 11:30 p.m.
Toronto. Also, we have
Toronto.
Canadian.
Yeah,
Amazing.
that's where our CTO is from. It's Toronto.
Yeah. So I think we're ready to start. So first of all, thank you everyone for being here with us today. So we're gonna spend the next 30 minutes or so sharing like a lot of insights, from Phil and Kunal on Kubernetes, KubeCon, sharing a little bit about the vision, where we see those things going. I mean, KubeCon, we know where it goes because it will be in Atlanta next week, but from a Kubernetes standpoint. And so today I'm your host, one of your hosts. I mean, let's call myself as an MC. I'm Nicolas Herman. I'm a senior director of product marketing here at Cast, and I'm really happy to be joined by Phil Andrews and Kunal. If you can, guys, do a quick intro about yourself before we jump right in. Let's
Phil,
go
you
All
first,
right,
wanna
Phil.
no.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I'll go first. Phil Andrews. I'm field CTO here at Cast AI. So I've been here a little over 4 years. So I've worked with, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of our customers. I've seen basically infinite different Kubernetes configurations. So I've kind of seen a lot from the trenches. So this will be kind of an interesting talk with Nico and Kunal.
Cool. I'm Kunal. I have been at Cast AI for a month now. I was at a Kubernetes provider before this as field CTO for close to 5 years, and very excited. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you guys. So yes, as I said already, KubeCon is it's right around the corner. We'll start next week with all the pre-event and also those specific session that I really like to attend that are like the session that were not selected to be at KubeCon. But then, yes, Atlanta next week. A lot of things to do there. We're gonna chat about it right after those question about like Kubernetes and so on. But I would say let's start with the first question, guys, and everybody can answer, of course, like both of yous. So we all know that Kubernetes is, of course, as we all know, that's why we're here, is one of the master orchestrator for containers and everything cloud native, but we also hear then, I mean, as we are like in that field since many years now, we know that it's a little bit complex and it's not that easy to architect well. And the thing is like, as you are guys in the business since quite a while, because you say feel like more than 4 years at Castai and you did like Kubernetes since like, I don't know when, like a very long time. Yes, what are the most common like mistake that you see into the field? And also, like, how would you think like it can be addressed? So let's start with you, Phil.
Sure. Um, yeah, I see it's the extremes on both sides. It's people who are ultra focused on resiliency to the point where they want to treat Kubernetes like it's an old server farm that nothing can ever move and nothing can be touched in. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where, you know, actually the other end of the spectrum is a lot better, right? Everything's ephemeral, everything moves around, it's very stateless. Like that tends to be the holy grail. It's the side where people are very concerned about, not letting anything move. As a result, a lot of times you don't see people using, proper resiliency techniques.
Mm-hmm.
They don't use PDBs on their workloads. The
Yeah.
requests and limits aren't set correctly. And then if things do move, it causes a lot of issues. So they've built themselves this kind of glass house where if anything is touched, it causes a lot of problems. That's kind of the biggest area that I see is issues on like that architecture side is just the inability to be resilient when things move.
Mm-hmm. And Kunal, anything to say on top of that?
I completely agree. I think one of the biggest mistakes is just underestimating how complex it can be.
Mm,
But I don't think that's a bad thing. Like complex systems are, I mean, that's what makes things work. I'm going to be in Atlanta next week. I'm going to fly in a plane. You know how complex an airplane is? If that wasn't
mm-hmm.
complex, there's no way I'm making to Atlanta. So I think people, if you underestimate it, let's say you're getting it up and running, you deploy a few pods, and now you're like, okay, this is good, and you skip the
Mm-hmm.
basics that makes it reliable at scale. I think that's a super common mistake. A good example is like if you don't set CPU or memory requests and limits properly. So
Mm-hmm.
Kubernetes is like you mentioned, it's orchestrator, sure, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to schedule those pods without those limits. But then there's this one tiny little container that starts hogging all the RAM and the CPU. And now you're
Mm-hmm.
wondering, why my nodes are crashing and what's happening. And, or
Yes.
on the opposite side, you allocate like just in case you go too far and over allocate. And now
Mm-hmm.
you're wasting money essentially, you know. So things like that. And what else? Health checks. I think you should not be skipping the readiness probes, for examples.
Mm-hmm.
So Kubernetes can't even, tell you if your app is stuck. If something
Mm-hmm.
breaks, you are like debugging and you don't have good visibility. So it's
Mm-hmm.
complex. And when we talk about security, for example, it's not like Kubernetes is insecure. You have to design it to be secure.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Don't run anything like as root, for example, because it is going to work.
Yeah.
Well, and
I
and to
yeah, go
Kunal's
ahead.
point,
So.
a lot of things work just fine when you're starting out and you've got three nodes in the cluster and a dozen or so different workloads with a couple of
Mm-hmm.
replicas each. Like you can get away with a lot of bad at that size of a Kubernetes cluster. When you're running 300 nodes and five or 600 different unique applications with all kinds of different parameters across them, with various levels of interconnection, then any small little thing, to Kunal's point, a missing request or limits where a noisy neighbor starts crashing nodes, then it becomes a much, much bigger issue when you start hitting those scales. So it's much better to get the basics down right when you have that, 3 or 4 node cluster. That way,
Mm-hmm.
when you scale, everything scales efficiently versus
Hmm.
trying to fix things when you hit scale problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And speaking of scale as well, like if you're starting off, like people start off with managing stuff manually. So you're just using like editing your YAML files live with
Mm-hmm.
like kubectl. And if there's some one-off small changes you want to make, I get it like when you're starting off manually, but it won't scale. You want to start using something like, GitOps very early. So have this
Mm-hmm.
single source of truth
Mm-hmm.
and start that like early is what I would say.
I think that's a really good segue to the second question that I had. It's like, of course, Kubernetes was built to scale because it's coming from Borg, one of the, I mean, like big engine that scales Google Cloud and so on and so forth. But the thing is, like, as you mentioned, it's like yes, you have two ways of doing things. The manual way, and then you have PTSD with YAML all the time because indentation and so on, like you're trying to fix those things, or you have the other way, which is like it has to be very, very well operationalized, and that's not easy to achieve also because you have maybe to think about like out of the box or using automation and so on. So from your perspective, it's like what did Kubernetes had to their set of features to help, people to scale their Kubernetes cluster because they had a lot of different features. I know we are like in a version 1.34, if I'm not wrong, or 1.33 again. 1.30.
134
One,
just launched within
yeah,
the past few weeks, I believe.
yeah, very recently. So we had a lot of things, I mean, new features that's coming like based on that, but also it's like, do you have, I would say, any lesson learned again from the field guys? Because you were mentioning Kunal, like going through automation and so on. So maybe you have like some example that you can share.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It was built to scale. That's like in the
Mm-hmm.
DNA for Kubernetes, but scaling does take some work. I want to
Mm-hmm.
give a shout out to the community. I think they have done a lot of work to make that a little easier. Like early on, it could handle like few hundred nodes. Now you can run like thousand and thousand node clusters. That is in itself quite huge.
Mm-hmm.
Auto scaling also has evolved quite a lot. We started with HPA, and now you have
Mm-hmm.
cluster autoscaler. Now you have VPA as well.
Mm-hmm.
But a cool example is I was reading this one blog with OpenAI. So they were running around 7,500 or 8,000 nodes, and they hit like a network limit with Flannel,
Mm-hmm.
which is a CNI.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did was they dropped the overlay network and they used the Microsoft Azure's native CLI.
You know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So little changes like that make a massive difference. So Kubernetes has come a long way. I think for some components, maybe, I'm sure Phil can share more stories. But I want to give a huge shout out to the community. I think there's been a lot of work on like even control plane optimizations, auto scaling, endpoint slices, for example, as well. And the community has just come a really, really far way. I have been involved and contributing to Kubernetes since, well, my freshman year. So it's been like 6 years. So I've seen like it's been like interesting. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Phil, yeah.
absolutely. I mean, so when I started at Cast AI, we were working with a lot of clusters that were around 1.19. That was right
Mm.
in the time frame when PDBs were launched. So
Mm-hmm.
that was a huge step forward for
Mm-hmm.
reliability and resiliency at scale when you had the ability to control how many pods were offline at a given time. Like that's one of the most flagship resiliency features that's been introduced to
Mm-hmm.
Kubernetes, since it began, right? That enabled a lot more automation because now you can vet how many are being restarted at a single time. Previously, it was, you do a rollout restart, yeah, you've got the rolling updates, methodology. A lot of people didn't use that or didn't assign it correctly. So you'd see times where 100% of deployments pods would go offline at the same time. Even now, there's a lot of people who just don't know PDBs exist.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of one of my favorite, items at scale. When you start talking about running 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 replicas of a pod, at your peak scale when the HPA scales up, you can't have all 50 replicas go offline at the same time at, noon time if you're, a food delivery company. You need to be able to
Mm-hmm.
handle that load, you need to be able to mitigate how much is going offline. Kind of one of the other big ones that was a really recent addition is 1.33 added in-place pod right sizing. That's something that
Mm-hmm.
people have been screaming about for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
It was coming in 1.30, and then it was coming in 1.31, and then
Mm-hmm.
132, and then finally it actually made the cut in 133. We've had customers accelerating their upgrade life cycles significantly due to 133 just to get it out there so they could do in-place pod right sizing because it's such an important feature with being able to collaborate with that with a lot of the active workload right sizing tools that are out there. I mean, Cast AI, we have our workload right sizing tool is we built in-place right sizing into it a year ago just to make sure that we had functionality for it. When it was still in alpha, we made sure that it was built and tested because it was such a
Mm-hmm.
valuable feature to our customers. So both of those things really help at scale because both PDBs and in-place right sizing are almost impossible to do without causing major disruptions when you have a 20,000, 30,000 CPU cluster.
Mm-hmm. So that's a really good point, and I want to double down on that one. It's like that's where to go back to the Kunal point, where automation is also key to help in the scaling. Because I mean, doing HPA, VPA, and managing all those clusters at scale, it's like almost impossible to do that as a human because you have so many things that you have to do. Or as you said, is you go to over provisioning and just say, okay, it will work because I gave that much resources, so I'm fine. But at some point, it's also still growing, so you still have to manage them, and you have to go back and forth and do that. And that's why also like I would say automation is really key for that. And maybe we can like touch a little bit about Carpenter because that's one of the way also you can like do some automation in terms of scaling.
Sure. Yeah, I can touch on that. So I've kind of seen a lot of Carpenter's development life cycle. They actually
Mm-hmm.
launched about 2 years after Cast AI launched.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the way AWS built Carpenter pretty much followed exactly in the footsteps of how Cast AI had designed our node autoscaler really was validating that we had done something right because both AWS and Cast AI picked the same methodology when it came to building a new next generation autoscaler. So that it kind of was proof that it was a good way of doing it. Um, Carpenter had kind of a rocky start for the first couple of years. It was released as an open source project. It worked kind of okay in certain edge cases. But then about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, it really picked up steam where when they delivered the 1.0 release, there was a lot of great features there. And it is infinitely better than the default cluster autoscaler, by a large margin.
Mm-hmm.
However, it also brings with it some different challenges. We've seen people that if you don't really it's another thing that you have to go deep on understanding. If
Mm-hmm.
you don't go deep into the knobs and dials, you can actually do worse on over provisioning with Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Mm-hmm.
cause more instability in your clusters.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen people that didn't look at what nodes Carpenter was provisioning. They just blindly trusted it and they just turned it
Yeah.
on and said go, or similar with auto mode in EKS.
In case, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they were getting like T3 instances in their production environment that were getting CPU throttled.
Yeah.
And they're having a hard time figuring out why they're getting performance degradation or why
Mm-hmm.
environments are having different issues. So it is a powerful tool, but it also comes with a lot of more of a learning curve, just like anything else. The more tools that
Mm-hmm.
you have available to them, the more things you have to go deep on and learn, the more things you have to delve into. Um, Kubernetes, it's by its very nature, right? It's incredibly complex. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you can't be an expert in all the things at all the time. And that's where finding tools that can offload some of that complexity, in areas where it's just taking up too much brain space to try to manage all of the different open source tools. If you can entirely run a Kubernetes cluster entirely on open source tools, and it will
Mm.
be extremely powerful. But now you need to be an expert in
Yeah.
every single open source tool that you deploy into that cluster. You want to use Istio, you got to be an expert in Istio. Carpenter, expert in a Carpenter, all the way up
Mm-hmm.
through the stack, and it just requires so much brain space on a DevOps team that you're bogged down in just managing the expertise around those tools where you have a hard time doing anything net new.
Yes, that's completely crazy. That reminds me the good old days of OpenStack when you know, I really like the Kelsey thing about Go Kubernetes the hard way to understand everything. So I did that with OpenStack, and that was really hard to be honest, because at least with Kubernetes everything seems to be like pretty well aligned in the community. Where OpenStack you have like Python, this and that. That was crazy back in the day. And then that also moves forward to the next question. It's like, Kubernetes at the very, very early days, we were like, okay, it's very good for stateless microservices that I'm running there because it's like resiliency and stuff that was like managed in a way, but it was mainly used, to run like, again, stateless application. But now we are seeing more and more stateful. And we even see like people running database on Kubernetes, right? And or even those very cool super cool Java monolithic big application because you really like to do lift and shift and replatforming in a way that is like, okay, let's run that on Kubernetes because why not? But the question is, okay, then we have like issues because we were talking about, for instance, we were talking about Carpenter, the capabilities to move like pods around and so on. But the question is, okay, what do I do when I have those big stateful applications? What should I do with them? Can I move them? But I will have interruption. So it's bad for my businesses because I have like SLA to follow and so on. So we are like, thinking about, and I mean, it's there now, the container live migration. And that's, that's kind of like, let's say finally the graal for a lot of people, which is like the vSphere vMotion, but for container. What are your take on that, guys, about like how it changed a little bit the game in the Kubernetes space, like the capability to move containers without interruption?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I would love to hear from Phil.
Yeah.
I mean, pods are meant to be ephemeral. Like you, one pod dies, you spin
Mm,
up the other one,
mm,
but that is okay for stateless stuff. And like you mentioned, databases, or if you're having a long AI training job, for example, or there's a
mhm,
stream processor or whatever, that's been up for a few days. Like you don't want it to be killed and then you restart it without any downtime. So we have an offering called Container Live Migration. So basically, checkpoint that there's a container state that you have on
mhm,
one node and you restore it on another node. So let's say
mhm,
databases, your training jobs or whatever, without any downtime, right?
mhm,
So I think that's pretty cool, and it's a big deal. So our rebalancer can basically move these stateful workloads around without any downtime. So let's say a spot instance is about to get reclaimed, and you need to move. So it basically means you can like bin pack your nodes much tightly. You can save a lot of money, and while doing all of this, you can still keep your uptime.
mhm,
Um, yeah, Phil, trying to share a bit more about it. The
Yeah,
magic
no,
of the
absolutely.
hood.
And the biggest area that we see container live migration being useful in is unblocking large enterprise, right? If you're
mhm.
a digital native company, if you were born in the cloud 3 to 8 years ago,
Yeah.
you're probably doing Kubernetes pretty right. You have relative microservices,
Yeah.
you're probably you might have been built in a cost crunch, that was kind of the funding crunch of 22, 23, 24, where it was hard to get funding. So people were really pushing
Mhm,
on moving spot instances and being cost
mhm,
effective. So a lot of those newer companies put the effort in to use Kubernetes the way that it was kind of designed in the beginning as, cattle, not pets.
mhm.
And this is a question I get all the time on LinkedIn and on conferences that I go to when I do speaking engagements is if you're using Kubernetes right, why do you need container live migration? Isn't that an anti-pattern? Sure, but it doesn't. I'm like, out of the customers that I talk to, 9 out of 10 have containers in their cluster that if you ask them, could I move every single container in your cluster right now? Every single pod? Could I restart every pod in the cluster
Mhm,
and move it right now? And you would have zero alarm bells going off. They go, oh no,
mhm.
no, 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 no. No, we got about 50% that was stuff that we, put a wrapper around and we bundled it in with Kubernetes, and it was stuff that we moved from our data center in because we had to shut down our data center, and some application modernization company came in and they just put Kubernetes wrappers around all these
Yeah.
old monolithic applications and stuck them in our Kubernetes cluster. So we don't manage the cluster very well, or we have a maintenance window of an hour every week that we, or once a month that we go in and we update those nodes, and we just take the maintenance hit. That's well, if you could treat those like they were stateless applications, if you could move them around your cluster without losing data, without having to restart them, without having to actually take a downtime hit, if you could do your node upgrades any time of day or night without customers even noticing,
Mhm,
would that be a benefit to you guys? Yeah, that'd be huge. That would be absolutely
mhm,
huge. Like just from an operational burden point of view, we wouldn't have to be so careful around those nodes. So like right now, we have to be careful of what we're doing on half of our nodes in the cluster.
mhm,
So, yes, from a purely idealistic standpoint, something like container live migration should not have ever been necessary if people rewrote from scratch every application that went into Kubernetes to make it properly microservice cloud native. That is
mhm.
far from the case, especially when you're talking large enterprises. Fortune
Yeah.
1000s have 20-year-old plus code that's
Mhm.
now being run in Kubernetes. Some of them can only run one replica, or some
Mhm.
of them take 15 minutes to start up
To
because
start.
they're a
Mhm.
Java Spring Boot application that has infinite cache that it needs to load. when you start thinking in the broad scale of, I mean, there's still COBOL running in production out there in
Yeah.
various places, like, and
Yeah.
not an insignificant amount of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very hard to kill working code. It's very hard to get budget to rewrite working code just to make it more friendly to operationalize. And so
Mm-hmm.
therefore we keep moving it around from data center to cloud VMs to Kubernetes, and it just keeps dragging along. With container lab migration, now you can at least treat them the way that you treat all the rest of your pods in the cluster. And so that's unlocking massive operational pain points for these
Mm-hmm.
customers, to where they can now actually see savings because they can bin pack pods, they can right size pods without having
Mm-hmm.
downtime. Like this has been a massive game changer for the customers using CLM.
No, I think you're completely right. And the way I'm seeing this, it's like, yes, I would. We all love to see like state-of-the-art deployment of new application, microservices, and so on. But the reality is very different, as you mentioned, because you have to still deal with legacy, and but still you still want also to use like new technology or orchestration like Kubernetes. So here, what we are saying is like, okay, now we are in some way unlocking those people to be able to move to Kubernetes and use the exact same application they have. Of course, at some point, it's better if they can like rewrite their code at some point, but at least where you give the opportunity to say, hey, you have the time, you can just move your applications there. That will work. You will have a lot of benefits from Kubernetes orchestration platform and so on and so forth. And at the same time, you will still have like some kind of capabilities that you need to have, like because you were used to have those, like again in VMware, for instance, where it was super easy to move VMs back and forth between the nodes, and now it's like ready for containers. So that's pretty cool, I would say. It's pretty exciting. And one more question about Kubernetes, because I mean, that's a very, very hot topic, GPUs, right? We are seeing that more and more in like I would say Kubernetes, and because what is pretty much also one of the best platform to run AI, training job and so on and so forth. So the question is like GPU is the very scarce like resource. It's something that you can't really find everywhere. It costs a lot of money. So the question is like from your perspective, it's like what we can see things coming like in that space to manage like GPU more efficiently and also avoid the fact that okay, I'm gonna buy all of them even if I don't use them just because maybe at some point I'm gonna need them. So up to you guys.
Sure, I can take that
Yeah.
in. And what we're seeing on GPUs, we actually just released a GPU report on this. Kunal might have been
Mm,
ready to comment on that too, so I won't go too deep into the report. But basically, the concept is that there are GPUs out there. They just seem to
mm,
be in all the wrong places.
mm-hmm,
And when you build your Kubernetes cluster in US East 1 or US West 1 or whatever the case
mm,
is, one of the, flagship cloud regions for the hyperscalers, you're sitting there along with, maybe 30,000 of your closest friends fighting over GPUs. If you build your, cluster in some rural region, some smaller region, some, far-flung region, if you build it in, maybe one of the smaller Canadian regions or one of the
mm,
smaller European regions, they also have GPUs. Some of them have more, some of them have less. It's very hard to tell because AWS, I'm speaking AWS specifically, but GCP also, they have, they don't tell you how many they have in each location. So finding them is the problem and finding where they're available. Once you've built your Kubernetes cluster, and maybe it's a cluster you've been running for the past 4 years, you don't want to lift that up and move it to a new data center just to go chase
mm,
GPUs down. So to your point, Nico, your option is reserve a tremendous amount of GPU capacity that you may or may not need,
mm.
or keep moving your Kubernetes cluster around to wherever you think you might be able to find GPU capacity. Neither are very good options
Yeah.
from a flexibility or agility perspective. We're actually going to be launching a kind of a cool service this year, the ability to add nodes to your Kubernetes cluster from anywhere else in the world. So now you can bolt on a GPU from US West 2 to your US East 1 cluster. Great. If there's spot availability in US West 2, let's grab it and glue it onto your US East 1 cluster. Now you don't have to move your cluster to chase the GPUs. You go find the
Mm-hmm.
GPUs and glue them onto your cluster where you need them. This is great for like inference at scale, where you don't need to do move training data around. It's
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
super helpful for training because you've got,
Mm,
maybe terabytes of training data that you got to move
yeah.
around and you got to pay to move that. But for inference, where all you got to do is pull down a model or store the model locally in each region that you want to have
Mm-hmm.
available to you, now you can leverage arbitrage across a lot of different regions. The latency on inference is negligible. If it
Mm-hmm.
adds another 100 milliseconds latency on a 1.5 second AI, inference call, it's who cares?
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to really add to your picture at all.
Mm.
So being agile and hunting down GPUs where they're available and being able to leverage them, using automation and being able to leverage these kind of tools where you can be flexible in what size GPU you need and what region you can find it in. That's how people are going to be able to manage their GPU costs as this AI race kind of heats up. Otherwise, you're competing against the, people that bought 2000
Mm-hmm.
H100s and, they've basically drained down an entire region. Tough luck. If you're a small
Mm-hmm.
player, you're going to have a hard time getting some H100s or,
Mm-hmm.
some Blackwells if you need them because they're being gobbled up by the bigger companies that just suck them down.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Kunal, anything to add?
No, completely agree. I think I'm quite passionate about democratizing the access to GPUs, how
Mm-hmm.
companies are going to be doing that. So thanks for sharing, Phil. But like traditionally, when we talk about Kubernetes, you treat GPUs like big binary resources. You ask
Mm-hmm.
for a GPU, you get a GPU, and now that's it. The problem here is that most AI jobs that you are doing is not going to fully use that GPU all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be like a lot of waste. So there's like now smarter ways to do it. You can share GPUs like NVIDIA's. It's called MIG, multi-instance GPU. There's time slicing as well. So for example, you can like slice an A100, for example, into a little
Mm-hmm.
by little isolated GPUs, which is like
Mm-hmm.
great for multi-tenant setups. Time slicing is also quite flexible. Like you can run multiple processes
Mm-hmm.
that share the same GPU, and you get like better utilization. For like lighter inference jobs, this can save up to like 80 to 90% of the cost. But with Kubernetes, you can do this now. Like there's the device plugin framework, there's GPU operators, many
Mm-hmm.
schedulers you can use. I think the community is also really leaning in. So because we're speaking of KubeCon, there's the Cloud Native AI Day at KubeCon now. So obviously the CNCF is investing, Linux Foundation is investing a bit in this as
Mm-hmm.
well. There's also a CNCF AI ML working group now that you can also check out. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so if I resume what you were saying, guys, so we have two options. I mean, we are tackling the main two issues that we have. First of all, it's like availability of GPUs, because then you don't have to fight against other like big companies. In the same cloud, you can, dynamically in some way get access to other GPU that, of course, sometimes cheaper than the one that you have locally to run your stuff there. And the second thing is like also optimizing if you want to just like reserve GPU, because you will using them all the time. But like as you said, Kunal, it's like one pod, one GPU. Now that we have the capabilities to do like time sharing and MIG and like GPUs in Kubernetes, we will also have a way to automatically optimize the usage of those CPU to make sure that you're not paying for something that is not used, but you're paying for something that is like used most of the time at the 100%. So you are like, not burning money for nothing, because, it's like, or maybe you have people running Bitcoin on your stuff, but that's another story. Okay, cool. So now, we spent a lot of time talking about Kubernetes and so on, but as we said, we have KubeCon next week. And, you know, guys, what's your recommendation? Do you have any like session that you really recommend to see there? Because it's like a bunch of session. You have a lot of very, very good session, but maybe about automation, operationalizations, auto scaling and those kind of stuff. And also from your perspective, what will be the big theme this time? Last year, I recall in Paris that was like still AI a lot. this year in London and also in Salt Lake City that was a little bit more about operationalization and so on. So what's your take on that, guys?
I'll defer to Kunal because this is my first KubeCon. So
Yeah, you
Kunal's the
say
expert here. So
that.
Well, first of all, little plug, come to the CastAI booth. We have amazing stuff happening. Phil
Mm,
is going to speak, I'm going to speak. We have a lot of workshops and fun little things. A lot of people who use CastAI are going to be doing presentations as well.
hmm
Um, Amazing, cool swag. And we have a book signing as well by Kelsey Hightower. So do come by for that as well. I'll leave the link somewhere in the chat after I'm done
hmm
speaking. Apart from that, I am a big fan of the booth crawl. So if you don't know, booth crawl is like when all the talks are done, people are in the sponsor showcase area and they can just mingle with other people and like literally everyone is there. So it's like a big crowd and you can
hmm
network with a lot of people. Stay hydrated. I think that's another one. Wear comfy shoes. Check out co-located events. If you're into AI, like I mentioned, there's Cloud Native and AI Day, stuff like Platform Engineering Day.
hmm
And if you're a beginner, there's like Cloud Native University Day. So that's like day zero, I believe, Monday. So you can check that out. Also, KubeCon is like quite popular. There's like Platform Engineering Day as well, WasmCon and other bits. So KubeCon is quite popular when it comes to submitting CFPs. Acceptance rate is like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, 6-7% or something. So there's this other event called Cloud Native Rejects, which is
Yeah.
basically before the KubeCon.
hmm
So talks that get rejected at KubeCon, people submit that to Cloud Native Rejects, and you can attend that as well. I love Rejects. I think it's a very cool conference.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, lots to do. I would say build your agenda, but you can't attend every talk, obviously, because there's like so many happening simultaneously. So go to schedule. If you're registered, you will get the link and build your agenda so you can select which talks you want to watch and you can add them, export it to your calendar. Lastly, there's this website called conferenceafterparties.com. You Google it, you'll find it. Pre-register to any after parties that you want to go to because those sell out very, very fast. And I would recommend doing that.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I really like the rejects. That's what I said. I didn't recall the name. That's what I said at the beginning. It's like really cool to see it because as you said, Kunal, you have so many people submitting CFP. So of course, not everybody can be
Mhm.
like, selected for KubeCon, even if you have like a lot of session happening.
Yeah.
But yes, go.
One other bit before I forget. So the keynote rooms always fill out
Mhm.
and they don't let people in. So you have to watch it from the outside on screens.
Yeah, on
So
screens.
if you want to watch the keynote live, make sure you go on time. Otherwise they will
Yeah.
close the door and you won't be let in.
But also something that I recommend, I mean, from my own perspective, it's like really pick what is the most interesting for you because you have many tracks like security or personalization and other stuff. And I also like recommend a lot to look at customer story because you get like real life example of how they build their
Mhm.
infrastructures. And I remember like attending a lot of them, and it's pretty cool to have also like real life experience because after you can also ask questions. One more. Now it's like not about KubeCon, but it's about Atlanta. So Atlanta, I would say I went there once and I have some good memories there. But it's like also sharing with the crowd. What are your tips? Like feel I'm especially looking at you because like you're the local, I would say, based in the US. Not really, I mean, big country. I mean, in France, it's like, yeah, it's like another region that is very close, but for you, it's like miles away from your home. But do you have any tips on what to do in Atlanta? What can you expect from that city?
So it's not as warm as people think it's gonna be. So still bring warm clothes because even though it's Atlanta and it's down south, I was looking at the weather
hmm
this week. I think the highs are gonna be like 55 during the day a couple of days, and the lows are gonna be down in the low 30s.
hmm
So it's gonna be chilly. Those are Fahrenheit for anybody who's not in Fahrenheit degrees. So we're talking like 0 to 10 Celsius.
hmm
definitely dress warmish. Other than that, I haven't been to Atlanta in years. I think the last time I've gone through the airport. The Atlanta airport's actually pretty nice. But yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
been in Atlanta, so I'm actually looking forward to it. It'll be my first time back there in quite a while. So yeah, I've yeah, it'll be fun. It's a nice area of the country for sure.
Yes. I would say, Kunal, anything to share? Will it be your first time in Atlanta or?
Yeah, I don't have much to share. I've never been to Georgia, so I'm
Okay.
I'm I'm just gonna wing it.
I've
Okay.
driven
So
through
I can
Georgia.
share.
The southern food is great. If you find like a Cracker Barrel, like Cracker Barrel is great,
Cracker
like
Barrel.
traditional southern like food. Everything's fried. So
Mm. Oh,
Uh,
but yeah,
super
no,
nice.
or
one,
barbecue. The other one is barbecue.
yeah,
Southern barbecue is great. So if you find like
I
a good
think,
barbecue shop.
yeah,
one
barbecue
thing
is
I
maybe healthier.
always
Yeah.
one thing I always eat when I'm in the States is this may sound like a bit funny, but it's grilled cheese. So you do the best grilled cheese. The grilled cheese in London is just I have not had good grilled cheese, but in the US it's just so good.
Yeah.
Grilled
So
cheese
I'm
with
not gonna talk
tomatoes.
about
Grilled cheese
food,
with tomatoes
guys.
is the best.
With tomato soup, it's just so good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. So it seems that I'm the only one who went like pretty recently in Atlanta outside of the airport. So of course I would recommend
The Frenchman's the expert.
yes, you see, that's crazy, right? That's crazy. But first of all, I would say, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know if they still do concert anymore, still, but Outkast and like the hip hop scene in like Atlanta, Georgia, it's like a big one. So if you want to go like to, I don't know, like bars when you can have like, live music, it's pretty cool. But you have the Coca-Cola Museum. If you want to have diabetes at the end of the week, you have to go there, and you can try
There's
all
there's a
the
Coca-Cola museum in Atlanta.
I mean, that's where Coca-Cola was,
Oh,
born.
because I went to one where you can try Coke from many countries.
Yeah, here it's same. You can try like all the soda made by, yeah, and I was mentioned the second one, Alexi. It's like, so yeah, I tried so many stuff and I was so like weird at the end. I was almost dying because I had too many sugar in my blood. That was like, okay, a cool moment, but at the end it was like drinking too many Red Bulls. And the second things to do, it's like, and I would say you have more, but we don't have a lot of time. It's like the aquarium, of course. It's one of the biggest that you can find in the US. So it's pretty nice to see. And I would
There's an
say
after
another,
party there. There's an
yeah.
after party there. Sorry. Yeah.
So
That'd be a
and
killer after party.
you can like yeah, two things at the same time. You can go to the aquarium and have a party at the same time. So that's the thing that you can do, I would say, in Atlanta. Outside of that, again, I spent a week there, but I mean that was for work. So, but that's the things that I did there.
Yeah, I would say like Kunal said, make sure to go look for if you've got vendors that you're going to be meeting at the show,
Mm,
go reach out to your vendors because they'll always give you the better swag usually, or they might have parties that they've got going on. So anybody who's on the webinar, make sure you reach out to your vendors and say, hey, you guys gonna be at KubeCon and
yeah.
score some better swag or score invites to a exclusive after party. Like there's still a few slots open for a lot of things, so I would definitely go shop around and see what kind of goodies you can get from your vendors. If you're a Cast AI
Yes.
customer, hit us up. If you're not a Cast AI customer, hit us up.
Whatever you do, hit us up. So last one I would say before we're closing this webinar and we are like answering a few questions, even if I saw that we already answered some of them. Any fun anecdote? So I mean, you already shared one, Phil. It's like you're talking about KubeCon during like the last 45 minutes, but you've never been there.
Nope, nope. This will be exciting for me. So I've been to, I think this year is going to be my fourth or fifth reInvent. And then I've been to several Google Cloud Nexts, but I haven't been to a KubeCon. So I've been doing Kubernetes, geez, I don't know, 10 years now, 8 years now, 8 years, I think, in
Uh-huh.
various ways. But yeah, I've never had usually the timing just never worked out. So I always ended up at reInvent just after Thanksgiving, but I never made it to a KubeCon. So this will be my first year at KubeCon. So I'm excited. It'll be fun. All our Kubernetes brethren out there with, it's a different for us, we were born and bred in Kubernetes, so everything Cast AI is Kubernetes. So it'll be interesting to be to a show where everything is around Kubernetes. You go to
Hmm.
reInvent and there's just a million vendors with all kinds of different things to do, different pieces of AWS that they apply to.
Hmm.
But here it's going to be everything based around Kubernetes. So I'm kind of excited for a very Kubernetes centric conference.
Cool. And Kunal, any anecdote or good story can be related to Kubernetes or very different? Because you already mentioned the grilled cheese, so that one, we put that on the side. Any other one?
It's quite interesting at KubeCon because you see like the creators of Kubernetes, you see like principal engineers, really
Mm,
popular folks like Kelsey Hightower just walking around, and you can run into them and just say hi. And they're all like quite friendly and approachable.
hmm.
Um, so I feel like yeah, don't be shy, because I know some people are like, I'm shy to go talk to people at the random booth. No, that's what the exhibitors are there for. Um, and if you're someone who doesn't like talking to people, they have like stickers. So essentially, when you pick up your badge, they give you stickers. There's the red sticker. If you put that, no one will come talk to you. If you put a
Hmm.
green sticker, then people will come
Yeah.
talk to you. So they have those sort of stickers as well.
Yeah.
So if you see someone with a red sticker, yeah, don't leave them alone.
Yeah.
I'm
But if
very
you see
chatty,
Talk
so
to
I'm glad
me.
you gave me the heads up on that one because I'd be like harassing red
yeah.
sticker people and I'd get myself in trouble.
I don't see too many. I have never seen red sticker people. Like I think it's so few.
Mm,
But if there are some people, we respect their opinions. That's fine.
hmm.
Most people I've seen have been like green stickers.
Mm,
Oh, there's also a job board at the exhibition center. So if you're someone looking for a role or something, or if you're looking to hire, you can go there as well. Um, but yeah, I think it's just a lot of fun. I mean, Kubernetes will humble you very fast, but that's
hmm.
also what makes it fun. You break things, you fix the things, then you laugh about it later. Um, so have fun, stay safe, and yeah, um, yeah, that's it.
So
Cool.
Quinn, I can field your question. The question for anybody else out there is there a possibility that cost of hiring Kubernetes experts will become so high by
Mm,
2026 that most companies won't be able to justify using it? I really don't think so. The cost of hiring a Kubernetes expert is a DevOps engineer, which is on par roughly with a software engineer these days.
Hmm.
It's it's good for people who are more of a jack of all trades, master of none, right? People who enjoy learning lots of different things and getting into lots of different areas. There's still plenty of room in Kubernetes. Kubernetes is not so insanely complex that it's, millions of dollars a year to run. It's not like some of the legacy technologies that were just, required immense care and feeding. Automation goes a long way towards using Kubernetes correctly. Where people fall into this trap is by one, trying to go way too complex, way too young of a stage when you're just getting started with Kubernetes, trying to use all the latest and greatest hotness. And you end up with so much overhead in
hmm.
all your tooling, and you have a, 10 node cluster, that's costing you a couple $1,000s a month, but you're constantly babysitting updates on Istio and, all your
Mm,
open source tooling and, your HPAs and everything else that you've got in there that you end up so bogged down in the details. Like you
Hmm.
need to kind of grow at the speed that your business is growing. You can start out with a relatively simple but well-built Kubernetes cluster. As you grow in complexity, you can add additional complexity to the cluster to solve problems as you encounter it. That's what's really important about Kubernetes is that it grows alongside you. It can be simple when your business is small. It can be complex when your business is complex and at scale.
hmm.
The big thing is not being complex and at scale when you're small and not being simple when you're at scale. You need to, and that's where a talk like KubeCon, a conference like KubeCon is so important is being able to go and keep up with what's out there, what your options are, what the technologies are evolving, where you can apply
Hmm.
automation, what new developments in Kubernetes do you need to be aware of, keeping up with the key features in 133 and 134, which ones are going to benefit you. For instance, 134 is bringing DRA. which is a huge feature. It's the ability to do additional types of requests and limits beyond,
Hmm.
just CPU and memory, basically. That's a significant oversimplification of it, but that's going to open the door to being able to request a lot of different types of usage patterns, and that's going to be important as we grow. So, you know, no, I don't think we're going to price ourselves out of Kubernetes. I think it's a matter of addressing the complexity that you need for your business at the state of where your business is, and not just chasing shiny objects for the sake of it. I've seen people with have been at all ends of that spectrum, which they were super small and they were way too complex, but then they were also
Hmm.
super big and they never addressed any of the complexity challenges. And both of them
Hmm.
cause a lot of harm. And they end up creating a lot of tech debt. It's just like writing code. If you don't handle your tech debt along the way, the bigger the code
Hmm.
base gets, the worse
Yeah.
it's going to be. So Kubernetes is the exact same way. If you don't manage the tech debt along the way and apply automation along the way, you're going to end up in the same place. So I definitely don't think where Kubernetes is going anywhere. If anything, it's a really good job for people who are very adaptable and Swiss Army knife folks.
Hmm. Cool. Amazing answer, Phil. I feel the passion when you're talking about it. And before we wrap up, I would say you already answered that question, like in the chat, I mean, in the question, but I think it's important also to like put some light on that. It was like, at what point do you think the operational complexity of Kubernetes will outweigh its benefit enough that will see meaningful adoption shift towards simpler alternative like managed serverless platform? And then you can think about like, okay, Fargate, ECS, GK autopilot, whatever, all those kind of things. So you already answered, Phil, but I think it's also good to go back on that one and have also your feedback, Kunal, also on that.
Yeah, we're actually seeing a lot of people moving away from Autopilot and Fargate.
Hmm.
One, because they don't offer enough tools to do the job that you need, and the cost overhead is
Yeah.
huge.
Hmm.
You can afford to pay DevOps engineers for when you start talking at scale, when you start talking tens of thousands of CPU size, infrastructures,
Hmm.
you can afford actually quite a few DevOps engineers with the delta in cost between Autopilot and a well-run GKE standard.
Hmm.
The caveat there is a well-run GKE standard. If you don't want to put any effort into running your GKE standard well, you're going to end up with the same problem. So I guess Autopilot allows you to be lazier, for
Hmm.
less of a penalty,
Hmm.
maybe, and that's still questionable. And so that's where, these serverless technologies. I've used Autopilot before. It's fantastic if you just want to bootstrap a really quick cluster and just throw
Hmm.
some
Hmm.
workloads on it just to do some quick testing. But it'll kill you at scale. The costs at scale. We're actively seeing customers moving away from Fargate and Autopilot back to standard, because that cost penalty is just so tremendous when you factor in, being able to manage it well at scale. Kunal, did you have
Kunal.
something? I think I might have stepped
Yeah.
in.
No, I completely agree. I think, I mean, completely echoing what Phil mentioned, we're already seeing that shift, from smaller teams. If you're starting out, your workload is predictable and you're like cloud native from day one or whatever, um, these managed services sure remove a ton of ops overhead, but
Hmm.
overall, I think Kubernetes still dominates once you are talking about things like cost control, especially scale as well, and portability, if these are your
Hmm.
priorities. Because the enterprises, like, Phil mentioned, if you're running thousands and thousands of nodes and stuff, enterprises need flexibility. So, for your
Hmm.
GPUs, for your CPUs, for your, your custom networking, for example, if you're working with what's the hybrid or multi-cloud, for example, not putting all your eggs in one baskets. So that's where serverless still, I would say, struggles. There are a lot of platforms out there making it simpler for folks to use Kubernetes. So it's
Hmm.
not like it's disappearing, but really some popular companies moving it under the hood. So I think it's about like abstracting the complexity away, and that's what like the managed Kubernetes providers do as well. Like they manage the control
Yeah.
plane for you, and you can
Yeah.
just spin
Yeah.
up clusters on top of it.
Hmm.
So the future is Kubernetes powered, but there's the simplicity that you get from serverless, but I think it's not going to disappear. And when you need to dominate scale, cost control, and what did I say, portability, yeah, enterprises are going to prefer that flexibility, which Kubernetes offers. So being complex is it's not a bad thing. It's how you implement it.
Mm-hmm. No, as soon as you put the right effort on the right place, then you can have like you can achieve whatever you want, right?
Yeah,
So
if you feel like you're managing Kubernetes is a bit complex for you, come to CastAI. We'll help you.
yeah, of course, come to our booth number 310 if I'm not wrong, but maybe I'm wrong. So like just double check. But it will be on the
310.
website. 310, yes.
3,
I still
310.
have good memories even if I'm old. Anyway, thank you everyone. Thank you Phil, thank you Kunal for all the very valuable insight that you shared during like the 50 minutes even more. So we went a little bit over, but I think it was like very useful I hope for and also I hope for the attendees. So thank you again. And yeah, so see you next week, all of you guys at KubeCon. And in the meantime, take care and be safe. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.